Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with what I prepared for you all today. Over the last few weeks, I've been getting some calls about employees sharing information that may not be appropriate, and this is so easy to happen. I do recall when I still had aides in the home that sometimes information would leak or a client would call and say that they felt that an aide mentioned something about them to someone else. And so this is something we really need to stay on top of is HIPAA is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. So what I want to do today is tell you how that applies to your actual everyday operations. I'm not going to go all the way into HIPAA and talk about that. I'm just going to talk about the privacy and how we can make sure that we stay on top of things with those that are working for us. So HIPAA has a privacy rule, and I think that's what mostly applies to what we do in home care. And the major goal of that rule is to be sure that an individual's health information is protected and that the information is available to those who need it so that they get high quality health care and it promotes the public well-being. So this is HIPAA has many facets, but the part I'm going to concentrate on today is the privacy rule, because you all have quite a few individuals. You have those in your office, you have the aides that are out there moving around every day, and there's a certain amount of information that they have to have in order to do their jobs. And so you want to be sure that that information is being kept confidential. So I don't know how many of you are still using a timesheet or a worksheet, but this is a particularly vulnerable area. Most of you have gone electronic, even those doing Medicaid have, but some of you may have an actual worksheet. So once that sheet is completed, it is a legal and confidential document. And that's even when the information is put on there that the RN shares, like the client's name, their date of birth, those things that identify that client. Even before the aide checks off what they've done for the client that day, that information is confidential. So if your aides have blank timesheets, they need to be secured. And the only individuals that should be looking at that worksheet are the client and their primary caregiver, and of course, your aides. One area that I found was particularly vulnerable is that the aides may carry those worksheets in their car, and someone may see it even through the window if it's turned up, or if they're transporting other people, it's just kind of laying around. Or if the timesheet or worksheet is in the client's home where it's exposed, there are people coming in and out of that home that have no need to know what that person's diagnosis is or any of that in the aide's home or the client's home. So there's a lot of exposure here. I know that a lot of them have apps on their phones now that will contain this information, but also keep in mind, there are so many people who hand their phones to their kids or their kids play with their phone. So we just need to be sure that they are aware that they have confidential information that needs to be protected. One of the things that I used to do, and I hope you all are doing this too, is make sure if you call your aide, because sometimes you're going to have to call them if they're at a client's home, and you may need to discuss another client, or you may want them to take another assignment, however you do that. And you might have to start discussing something about that client with them. They need to be sure that they are not repeating that back so that it's heard, because that would be sharing information about another client in front of someone who doesn't have a need to know. And that is being overheard speaking on the phone. They should never disclose what they do for another client. Say there's something, you may have 2 or 3 clients in a complex and one aide is servicing them. They may be tempted, or one of the clients may ask them, well, what do you do for Miss Jones? And then they may start to share, well, I help her with her bath or whatever, or, she has incontinence supplies. That is just a no-no and it should never be shared, and they need reminders. Or maybe another client may ask them, I know that Miss Jones just got out of the hospital. What was she in the hospital for? It's very easy for it to happen. So we have to constantly remind them to not share this information. And then one thing I used to do, and I don't know if everyone does this, but whenever I made an assignment and I sent an aide to a new client or a different location, I always gave them what I considered report. Those of you on the line that are pretty much in healthcare or you're an RN, you know what that is. Once you take care of a client and you report off at the end of your shift so that they know what happened during the shift, or if you assumed a new client, someone will give you the information. So a lot of times you may call an aide to give them that information to get them to go to a new client. You're giving them the address. You're telling them kind of what's wrong with that person. So they may scribble that down. A lot of this may be on apps, so wherever they're putting it, but just keep this in mind. If wherever they're putting that information, they need to protect it. And it may not be someplace in a format where it's in the computer. They may write it somewhere on something that could fall on the floor, that's in their purse later that someone else could see, or that they pull it out or drop it. So if they do record information about a client on some document that is not secure, they need to make sure that they destroy it when it's no longer needed. And so the best way for them to dispose of information is to use a shredder if a shredder is available. I don't know how many shredders I went through when I had aides in the home. We shredded everything. At one time when I worked in corporate America, I worked in a competitive area where we gathered information about our competitors. And so we had to be very careful about what we threw in the trash. And when I first came to that department, the administrator said, the only thing you put in the trash is your coffee cup. And so I always remembered that. In healthcare, it's pretty much the same. Even in your office, you need to make sure that you don't have anything in that trash can that has a client's name on it. You don't just dispose of documents in the office that can be picked up by people that come in the evening to empty the trash. You need to be shredding that information so that nothing is identifiable. And I believe I mentioned this before, you do not want to have a list of clients up on the wall in your place of business. Sometimes schedulers may do that. Hopefully they've stopped, but you do not want a list of your clients because anyone could come in that has nothing to do with HIPAA and they will see that information. One thing that I used to tell my aides is if they did have a piece of information that had to be thrown in the trash, I asked them to tear it up into small pieces and wrap it in a paper towel or newspaper and throw it in the trash, not just throw it in there openly, not torn or anything, but just doing their best to protect the client's information. And then what we did is we had an attestation form where we said, you will not share the client's information. This is just generically. You will keep everything confidential. And then we have a place that they could sign to attest that they agree to that information, because they can get in trouble individually and the company can also for allowing that information to get to someone that is not allowed to have it. And then annually, when we did their evaluation, we would not have them sign it again, but we would have them review it. And also there were times when I was kind of aware that something may have been said in the wrong place or information was being shared. I would go back into their files and make a copy of that attestation sheet where it has everything that they need to be mindful of and send it to them so that it was a refresher. So there's many ways that you can do this, but you all can decide how you want to do it. As I tell you all each and every time, I'm happy to provide this information to you all so that you can use it in your businesses. But before you make any changes to what you do as a business owner, please make sure that you go to the authorities and make sure that they tell you that this is something you need to change. But I try to stay on top of things so I can share with you each and every month. So right now, I'm ready to receive questions. If there are any questions, let's first talk about this particular information that I shared today, if someone has a question. Just unmute your mic and go ahead and ask if you have something. Okay, so if there are no questions about HIPAA and sharing information, are there any other questions that anyone has today? Okay, all right. Well, I thank you all for coming, and I will make sure that this information gets up on our YouTube channel, and I will let you all know when it's there. And most of you know how to get in touch with me because you probably got the email to invite you today. And so if you need anything from me, please feel free to contact me and we will proceed with whatever your needs are. I'd like to say again, happy holidays to all of you. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and get your companies ready to start the new year. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.